So there's been a lot of buzz lately in the news as it pertains to religious freedom laws and the role of gender, particularly when we look at transgender and gender identity. So what exactly do we mean when we talk about gender identity? What exactly is someone who is transgender? Many southern states right now have bills introduced in legislation that discuss the right to essentially decide whether or not you're going to serve somebody on the basis of Christian morality. And so what you end up looking at is some businesses, such as perhaps your psychology services or lawyers or other types of high-end services might actually use as some kind of a justification for not serving transgender people religious morality. And others say that, well, that right there is actually discrimination. In the same way you couldn't say you're not going to serve someone because they're black or Hispanic, you cannot say you're not going to serve someone because of their gender identity. Still, in other cases, you've got universities that use religiously perceived definitions of what gender is as a basis to exclude people from membership of certain college clubs. So you might have, for example, a Christian college that will say if you're transgender, you can't be part of this club or you can't be a member of this organization. And that right there is arguably discrimination if you identify with those who believe that people can be of a different gender even though they are a set biological sex. Probably the most controversial of all of these laws we've heard about recently is the North Carolina law, the bathroom law, or bathroom bill as it's called, where they basically say that either you are a female and you use the female bathroom, or you are a male and you use the male bathroom, and there's nothing in between. And this comes in response to a law that Charlotte had passed that allows people to choose whichever restroom they feel like they identify with the most. And so we look at, is there a difference between gender on the basis of identity and sex on the basis of biology? And that right there, my friend, is the question that we're going to contemplate right now. So what do we mean when we say biology, or when we talk about one's biological sex? We are talking every single time about either you got it or you don't. No further explanation needed, I don't think. Gender gets a little bit more complex, however, as gender can be argued as a social construction much in the same way that race is. Let me explain. In an earlier video, I discussed race as a socially perceived thing. In other words, when you are looking at somebody else, not yourself, that's more identity. When you're looking at someone else, you characterize them as part of a racial group based on certain physical characteristics, such as they have black skin, so they're black, or they have brown skin, or they have they're white with blonde hair and blue eyes, and so they're white. And we tend to do this in a way that race is a socially constructed, socially perceived thing. In that same video, I put up this picture of these two twins. One of them is white, clearly, with red hair, and the other one is what we would consider to be black based on social perceptions, but they are biologically the same. And their identity may also be different. One might identify as white and one might identify as black based on how they are socially perceived by others. If you apply that same thing to gender, then you start to accept gender roles as scientific fact. So you believe things like girls are cheerleaders, girls are dancers, girls like dolls and the color pink, whereas boys like bold colors like blue and red, primary colors like yellow. Boys like football or are always going to be a little bit more activity oriented or like to work with their hands. Girls like music and arts, boys like to build things and be practical. If you use that logic, then by that logic, you can expect that no girls are going to want to play football. You expect that no girls are going to want to be engineers or be good at math. And no boys want to play the cello or dance or be cheerleaders. I think that most of us who have daughters in particular are going to say, well, that's a little bit unfair to assume that my daughter is defined by socially perceived gender roles. After all, I don't want my daughters to run into glass ceiling issues one day. I want them to be able to go as far as they want to be and be neurosurgeons or be engineers or great inventors or scientists or astrophysicists, or if they want to be, I want them to be a teacher like my 4-year-old recently said. I want to be a teacher like you, Daddy.
I want to be a teacher just like you, Daddy.
Melts my heart every time. In the same way that race is socially perceived, if we don't agree that gender roles are 100% applicable and that in fact women can be more than society defines them as through those things, well then why can't we also say that some biological men might actually identify more closely with being female, and some biological females may identify more closely with being male? And that right there is what you're looking at when you define what someone who is transgendered is. The argument becomes, do you let someone who feels like they are more a woman go into a women's restroom, or do you allow someone who identifies as more of a man to go in a men's restroom, even if their biological sex may be different? Target has been the most recent in businesses and companies that are trying to get involved in this whole social debacle, and they've made a stand by saying that they're going to allow anyone to use whatever restroom they feel like they identify with, which has caused a huge social media and public outcry from Christian conservatives that say, well, there's no distinction between biological sex and gender, and they define both as either you're a man or you're a female, and to think any other variation of that defies Christian morality, which is really important, because if you're not Christian, then you don't adhere to Christian morality as a way of living, which then presents this issue. Are these laws discriminatory, the ones that prevent transgenders from using whichever restroom they want to use? Are we being discriminatory against individuals if they are homosexual and they want to buy certain services that you would sell to anyone else, but you won't sell to them because you say that it is against your Christian morality? So really, the question could seriously be a question of religious freedom from the conservative Christian standpoint, but it truly becomes a issue of discrimination from the perspective of someone that identifies as someone different than a Christian that adheres to these Christian morals. Do you feel like it would be more or less awkward to pee next to someone who feels like they are a female when they're in the men's room? Or do you think it'd be more appropriate to share the men's room with someone that feels like they are more of a male? And vice versa. So on the one hand, people that are against these religious freedom laws say that this is discriminatory towards transgenders, and that other laws that are similar are discriminatory against homosexuals or whatever it might be, because of the difference in how we define what gender actually is in society. But others say, mainly your Christian conservative base, are arguing that, well, to allow just anyone to use just any bathroom, then you put our daughters in danger of being raped by pedophiles, or women in general being raped by rapists, or whatever it might be, and you're empowering these criminals to go on there and commit crimes. People that are in favor of saying these laws are discriminatory actually raise a pretty good point when they say things like, well, today, if you're a criminal and you're a rapist or a pedophile, what's to stop you right now from going into a restroom and doing these things? Odds are you're not going to walk into a restroom dressed like a woman if you don't identify as one in the middle of broad daylight for the purpose of being a pedophile and molesting children or raping women. And so if you look at it like that, it seems incredibly unlikely that you're going to see where these kinds of crimes will be on the rise. But if you look on the other side, if you are a man in a men's room that identifies as a woman and wearing a dress or makeup, then I would argue that people that identify in such a way would actually probably feel more in danger going to the bathroom every single day, just because of the fact that they feel like something that they are not when they're in the restroom. Really, what the issue boils down to is, do we believe in the idea that someone can be born male and feel female or identify as female, or that someone can be born female and identify as male? And we're never really going to see where these issues are resolved until we understand one another on the perspective that either A, we are biologically male or female, end of story, or we're going to be more open to these definitions of what gender identity actually is. What are your thoughts on gender as a social construction? How do you feel about transgenders using the restroom? Or how do you feel about these religious laws that are saying that people ought to be able to make choices of who they serve based on Christian morality? Are they discriminatory? Leave it in the comments below. Catch you next time.